I'm 74 years old, and I finally understand something I spent most of my life refusing to see. My children didn't drift away suddenly. They drifted away slowly, while I was busy believing everything was fine. I'm telling this now because time has changed shape for me. Days feel shorter. Years feel thin, like paper you can tear without meaning to. And there are things I won't get the chance to...
I'm not telling this to clear my name. I'm telling it because the truth doesn't disappear just because you avoid it long enough. It only waits. These days, the house is quiet in a way I didn't expect. Not peaceful, just empty. I still wake up early, out of habit. I make coffee for one. I sit at the table where 4 chairs used to be filled with noise, arguments, laughter, complaints about the food. Now, the chairs are just furniture. My phone doesn't ring much. When it does, it's usually a reminder from a clinic or a number I don't recognize. I used to think that was just how old age worked. People get busy, lives move on. But that's not the whole truth, and I know that now. When my children were young, I thought I was doing everything right. I worked hard, I showed up when it mattered, or at least when I thought it mattered. I believed providing was the same thing as being present. I wasn't cruel, I wasn't violent, I wasn't absent in the obvious ways people warn you about. That's what makes this harder to admit. I was there, but distracted, tired, always half looking at the clock. I grew up believing that a good parent keeps the family afloat. You don't complain, you don't slow down, you do what needs to be done, even if it costs you something, especially if it costs you something. In my 20s and 30s, life felt like a long hallway, plenty of time, plenty of chances to fix things later. I took a job that demanded long hours. At first, it felt temporary, just until we were stable. Just until the kids were older, just until the next promotion. There was always a just until. I missed dinners more often than I remember. Not every night, just enough for it to become normal. I'd come home late, loosen my tie, sit down heavily. They'd already eaten, homework half finished, stories already told to someone else. They would still talk to me at first. They'd tell me about school, friends, small victories that felt huge to them. I listened, but not deeply. My mind was still at work, still solving problems that wouldn't remember me anyway. Sometimes I'd say, "Not now, tell me later." Later rarely came. I didn't think those moments mattered much. Children are resilient, I told myself. They won't remember a missed conversation. I was wrong about what they'd remember. I remember one birthday clearly, not because it was special, but because of how ordinary my mistake was. I was supposed to be home by 6. There was a cake, candles, a camera waiting on the counter. Work ran late. Nothing dramatic, just meetings, delays, a client who wouldn't stop talking. By the time I walked in, the cake was already cut. The candles melted into wax puddles. My child said, "It's okay, Dad," too quickly. That sentence stayed with me longer than the birthday ever did. As the years went on, the conversations changed. Shorter, less personal. They stopped asking for help with homework, stopped telling me about friends, stopped waiting up for me. I didn't notice right away. I told myself it was independence, growing up. I was proud of them for not needing me. That pride feels different now. There were school events I meant to attend and didn't, games I promised I'd make it to, trips I postponed. Each time I had a reason, and each reason sounded reasonable. That's the dangerous part. Most damage doesn't come from bad intentions. It comes from reasonable ones repeated too often. At home, I became someone who corrected more than he connected. I pointed out what needed improvement, grades, behavior, plans for the future. I thought I was guiding them, preparing them. What I didn't realize was that guidance without warmth feels like judgment, and judgment creates distance. They started sharing less. I filled the silence with advice they didn't ask for. When they were teenagers, the gap widened quietly. No slammed doors, no shouting matches, just less eye contact, less laughter. I mistook calm for closeness. I remember sitting in the living room one evening, newspaper open, TV murmuring. One of my children walked past, paused, like they wanted to say something. I didn't look up right away. By the time I did, they were already gone. I don't know what they wanted to tell me, and now I never will. When they left home, I told myself this was how life worked. Children grow up, they move on, parents step back. We stayed in touch, holiday calls, birthday messages. On paper, nothing was wrong, but paper doesn't tell you how it feels when conversations stay shallow, when you don't know who your children really are as adults, when you hear about important moments secondhand. I thought closeness was permanent once earned. I didn't know it needed maintenance. By the time I started to feel the distance, it already had weight, years of small absences pressed together. I told myself there would be time to fix it later. There always had been before. That belief lasted longer than it should have. Now, at 74, I can see the pattern clearly. Not as a villain, not as a monster, just as a man who kept choosing later over now. And later, eventually, runs out. The moment that finally broke through my excuses wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no final argument. It was a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. White walls, a chair that was never comfortable no matter how you adjusted it. I was the one lying in the bed. Nothing life-ending, the doctor said, but serious enough to slow me down, serious enough to make people use softer voices around me. I remember looking at my phone afterwards, messages from coworkers, old friends I hadn't seen in years, and then the names that weren't there. My children did come, eventually, separately, short visits, careful conversations. They were polite, concerned, kind in a distant way. They asked how I was feeling. They updated me on their lives in broad strokes. Work was busy, everything was fine. I realized, lying there, that I didn't know how to ask deeper questions anymore, and they didn't seem to expect me to. When visiting hours ended, they hugged me gently, not the kind of hug you linger in, the kind you give when you're already thinking about the drive home. After they left, the room felt larger, too large. That's when it hit me, not as guilt, but as clarity. This distance wasn't recent, it was practiced. It had been learned over decades. I went home after that with more time than I knew what to do with. Recovery forces you to sit still, to notice. I started replaying memories, not the big ones, but the small pauses I'd ignored, the moments when my children reached out and I half turned away, the times I chose being right over being close. I remembered how often I'd listened just long enough to respond, not long enough to understand. How often I'd end conversations with solutions instead of curiosity. I thought love was proven through responsibility, through sacrifice, through providing. I didn't understand that love also needs attention, undivided, unhurried. By the time I understood that, my children had learned how to live without expecting it from me. I tried after that to reach out more, longer calls, messages without a reason, but there's a difference between reaching out and being let back in. They responded, always respectfully, but the warmth I was hoping for didn't return. You can't ask someone to unlearn distance just because you finally noticed it. There are things that cannot be fixed by effort alone. Some things require timing, and timing, once missed, doesn't circle back. I don't blame them. That took time to accept. They didn't leave me. They adapted to me. They built lives that didn't rely on my presence, because for years my presence was uncertain. That realization sits heavy, but it's honest. I see now how success distracted me from intimacy, how being needed at work felt easier than being needed at home. At work, expectations were clear. At home, feelings were messy. So I avoided the mess. Now the mess is quiet, and that quiet is harder to sit with than any argument would have been. If you're listening to this and you still have time, I won't tell you what to do. I don't trust advice that pretends life is simple. I'll just tell you what I wish I'd known. Being present feels inefficient. It doesn't look productive. It doesn't give immediate results. But absence always leaves a mark, even when no one complains. Children stop reaching when reaching hurts, and they rarely announce when that happens. If this story meant something to you, you don't need to change your whole life. Just notice the moments you postponed connection. Those moments add up. As for me, I make coffee for one. I sit with my memories, some warm, some sharp. I'm grateful my children are healthy. I'm grateful they found their way. I just wish I'd walked alongside them more often instead of behind them trying to catch up. At 74, I understand why they drifted away. Understanding doesn't bring them back. It just helps me tell the truth while I still can. That's all this is. The truth spoken late and maybe heard in time by someone else.